let's get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Seefts. I'm Senior Director of Software Development for Oracle Apex. In today's Apex office hours, we're going to talk about what's new in Flows for Apex version 23.1. And before we start with that, I do have a few brief announcements. First up, we have a few new blog posts. So when you go to apexoracle.com/blog, you'll find all of our Apex blogs, and there are a few new postings to highlight. There's a new FAQ on Oracle Forms to Apex modernization. So if you're running forms, if you're considering Apex, or if you want to modernize your forms applications, take a look at this FAQ. Walks you through all the things to consider and all the benefits Apex provides. And there's also a new blog post on getting started with Oracle Apex in Oracle Cloud infrastructure. The next up, Apex office hours on August 8th. We are going to have our next Apex office hours in Romanian. And then on August 15th, there's going to be a customer story, low code, and AI for automating invoice processing and approval workflow. You'll find all the office hour links on apexoracle.com/office hours, and then the specific links down here. And also, if you want to view any of our past office hours, we have been doing this now for a couple of years. You can go to apexoracle.com/office hours and look at all the recordings of past office hours. The next, we have a few conferences to talk about. Currently this week and next week, there is the Latin America community tour. There's going to be a whole bunch of Apex sessions happening. So if you're anywhere in Latin America, take a look at this link here to see when this tour is happening in your country. And then in September, starting on September 18th, is Oracle Cloud World. Cloud World is a successor to Open World. It's the second time that we're doing this in Las Vegas. I had the pleasure to be there last year. It was a great conference. This year, I think we're going to be even bigger with even more Apex sessions. So definitely take a look at oracle.com/Cloud World. There's lots of Apex content at this year's Cloud World conference. All right, with that, I would like to introduce the team that's going to talk about Flows for Apex today. Richard Allen, he's part of our team. He joined us about 2 years ago. He's been doing Flows for Apex with the guys here for some time. And he's actively working on developing Flows for Apex further out of our group. Then we have Moritz Klein and Niels de Bruyn from the MT GmbH. Still getting used to that. And Luis Moreau from Insam and Jörg Doppelreiter from Solicon IT GmbH. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to you guys.
So yeah, welcome to the Apex office hours about Flows for Apex and what's new in Flows for Apex 23.1. Interestingly, it's a funny story. I still can't get used to putting a safe harbor slide out there. I'm used to seeing it, not presenting it.
I like it. Well done. Very nice.
Yeah, but yeah, that is how it works with products, you know. So a quick wrap up, what's Flows for Apex? It's a BPMN 2.0 based workflow engine for Apex, specifically for Apex applications. It's an open source project developed by the Apex community with contributions from Oracle. You might have seen we have like 4 companies actually supporting the stuff. It's open source, it's a community project, but luckily we have a couple of companies that support our development of the tool. Quick run up on the components. You have a graphical designer to model your workflows with the BPMN 2.0 notation. We have a workflow engine that runs the processes. That's purely in the Oracle database. Another thing, you don't need to install anything else. You already have the Oracle database, you have Apex. Install Flows for Apex to it. No additional server needed. Then we have monitoring and management in our application that will come later. And obviously we have a couple of Apex plugins that will help you integrate workflows into your Apex application. So a quick look at new features. So we've picked a couple. Interesting story from development. We plan to have just a maintenance release, so polish something here and there and dump it out. Well, it came differently. We have a couple of new features and probably not a couple, a lot. It took a bit longer than we expected, but yeah, we think it is well worth it. So first thing what we want to look into is messageFlow and REST. So let me open up an application. Let me see, I still have a session. Yeah. So this is one of our sample applications that we also typically deliver with the new release. This one is a bit modified because this one runs on Apex 23.1. Our standard sample application is developed on Apex 20.2, which is the minimum release you need for Flows 23.1 to run on. So we support quite old Apex releases. You should be on new releases of Apex. Don't stick on the old releases too long. So the simple application is pretty much where I can send in a couple of expense claims. So I'm traveling, I have a couple expenses, and I asked my company to reimburse those expenses. So I already submitted a couple and will now pretend to be a manager that will accept a $25 lunch. And now I have a lot of expenses that are already approved, which are now like in the finance department, so it needs to be paid. So let's just pick a couple of accounts, put it on different transfers. Choose bank transfer here. So I will now like send out the transfers. And oh yeah, one thing came back with an error message. So this account doesn't work with the credit card. Okay, that's fine. Let me switch it, save it again. So, and as you see here, the only paid transaction is the credit card one. So we're assuming credit card is immediate. Bank transfer takes a bit of a time. It shouldn't be 3 days, but sometimes it is like that. So we're facilitating that the stuff is waiting here. So if I look at a couple of things, this is the model in behind the scenes. So what we did here is send out a request to an outside system. Hey, I have this payment to be processed, and that might take a while. So that's sending a message outside, and this is receiving a message here. So we will wait for the bank to give us yes, the transaction has been done currently. And let's see how fast my bank actually is. Oh, it has done a couple of things. So I'm probably on Do Not Disturb. What we also did, so we showed an easy integration. So we have push notifications enabled. You don't need to have push notifications. You can do it in a different way, but this is pretty much how it works. That's so to say, now most stuff is paid. Here is something which is still in approved state, which is probably waiting to get paid, which is fine. So this is how you can model your stuff. If I look in here, so we have a lot of decision points. Is everything approved? And we go to payment, and here you can actually decide. And the really new thing is the messaging integration here. And yeah, let's say it feels like magic that the process then goes onwards. But yeah, let's go over to Jörg and explain the magic behind that.
Thank you, Moritz. So as you already mentioned, we will now have a short look behind the scenes. So what happened in the past here in this example? So we saw the push notifications, the receives, the acknowledge of the payments has been received, but that was done via the REST API in the background, and I played the bank here. So what I have done is I just sent a message to the system via our new API. So first thing, of course, I need to get a token. So I have a client ID and a secret, and I can access the API. And the second thing was I was using a message endpoint for putting out the information to the system. So in this case, I need some, of course, values that are stored in the process in the background to identify what is the correct payment. I need to provide a specific payload with key value and another payload in it where I can exchange business relevant content with our process system and the engine app. In that case, I just provided the information that the payment has been received, and I got a success message in the background of a response from the service. If I try that a second time, of course, it will fail because the message has already been processed. So we don't reveal the message here to the external system because of security reasons. We will have a log system in the background where you can see exactly what was the issue. With the new release, we deliver a REST API that covers everything that you can do with the PL SQL API, as well as the Apex plugins that we provide. But even more, you can also select information out of the system, like which diagrams do we have, which statuses they are, and which processes are currently running. Maybe to answer already one question up front. If you install or migrate to the new version, we will not automatically REST enable your schema and install the modules because of security reasons, of course. And this is an optional feature, so it is not necessary to use it and to REST enable your schema in the database. If you want to do so, we provide a script that you can easily import the endpoint and all necessary privileges and roles to the system. After that, it's a good point. We also have a documentation ready on our Flows for Apex website, where you can then find more information on the REST modules. And you will also have 2 download possibilities there that I quickly want to show. One thing is what I'm currently showing. So we will provide a Postman collection that you can use. You just have to enter your host and you have to provide a client ID and a password. That how you will obtain that, I will show you in a second. And you will get a complete collection of all endpoints that we provide. Plus, in each endpoint, you will find an example so you can start right away testing and integrating it. The second thing we provide is an OpenAPI documentation of the REST API. So in this, we also explain or describe all endpoints that we have. Here we have categorized it a bit for better overview. And I will not go in detail through all endpoints, just a quick overview. We have endpoints for getting your models out of the system so that you see what models are currently available. You can also filter for them. You can filter by name or by a specific status. Then we have the processes, so you can also get an information which processes are currently running, and you can interact with them as you can do with the plugins or the PL SQL API. So you can create a new process, you can update them or delete them. The same for process variables, so you can also handle that. And you can see where is your process currently at. So you can see all the different steps where your process is currently working on, so what steps are active in the system, and you can also move forward with that and do actions like complete or restart in case that something runs to an error. And one specialty is the message endpoint. So this is what I've currently have used now for these bank payments. We have a message endpoint that you can put messages to the system without the need of any other integration of the other parts. If you have a closer look at one of those endpoints, you will also see what will be the request body that you will receive, or the response body, and what will you need as a request body to transmit to the system. Well, there are quite a lot of endpoints in there. So each endpoint is secured by a different privilege in the system and a role behind that or before that. So if you have installed the REST API, I'll quickly go to the configuration section once. We have a separate configuration section, therefore, so that's where I mentioned how you get access to the system. You can create your REST clients directly in the application. You don't need to go to the database or anything else. So you can just provide here some mandatory information and then choose between 1 or 4 roles. A detailed explanation what roles and what privileges are available and how you need to use them will be available on the website. I just want to quickly point out the messages role, because this is the one that is designated for use with external systems like the bank in our scenario. So you only have access, or this client will only have access to update messages to the system, but nothing else. So you don't reveal anything of your environment. And with that, I want to stop my sneak peek on the REST API and like to hand over to Richard. And Richard will now talk a bit about task assignments, due date, and priority. Thank you.
So the messageFlow and REST, I think, are two very powerful features that we've added here. messageFlow, which allows you to send and receive messages from inside the BPMN model, and then REST enabling both messageFlow and the entire Flows API is going to make it very powerful. I now want to move on and talk about task assignment, due dates, and priority, which is one of the features that will help our business users and process modelers. So I'm now going into the Flows for Apex application, and I'm picking up a process model that was created earlier. And this is a very simple business model where we have an employee who submits his expenses to his manager, who reviews and approves them. If he rejects them, he sends them back to the originator. If he approves them, then it goes to finance. And there's an expense clerk who checks them, and then an accounts payable clerk who makes sure that they get paid. Now, this is a very simple process. In reality, it would be more complex and automated, but it works to serve. It serves to illustrate the points here. So when you first look at that, we have these lanes, and you, as an Oracle person, you look at this and you go, okay, so a lane maps nicely to a role, and I know about roles because I've got them in the database and I've got them in Apex. But there's a few problems which I'm going to go through. So the first, our modeler here just put these two things in the finance lane, and actually they're done by two different people. So what I want to do, what I can do in Flows 23 is I can select the lane here, and you can see I've got icons here for putting a new lane above or below, but I've also got icons for dividing the lane into 2 or 3 parts. So let's just divide this into sublanes, and you can see that I've got sublanes in here. So let's now call this let's now add this for the expenses clerk, and this for the accounts payable clerk. And what I can do is I can say in the role, the definition of the role in the properties panel here, I can expand this, and I can say, yeah, this lane actually maps to a role, and the role is one that my system already knows about, which is my finance expenses role, and this one likewise maps to the finance accounts payable role. Now, those of you who have used Flows for Apex before will notice that the properties panel here looks a little bit different. And one of the things we've done in this release is to upgrade the viewer and modeler and properties panel, and we now have this nicer, more modern user interface on the panel rather than the tabbed panel that we had before. So then the next thing, let's think about who is doing. So this is the employee. Now, is there an employee role in the company? Yes, but if I send the expenses back to the employee, I want to send it back to the individual person, not to every employee in the company. And likewise, the manager lane is context specific, context dependent, and this needs to be the manager of the person submitting their expenses, not just every manager in the company. So mapping these lanes to roles doesn't really work very well. So what I can do now in Flows 23.1 is I can do explicit task assignment. And here I come to the properties panel. You can see if I open this up that I can assign an individual user or a group of potential users, potential groups of users, and any users that are excluded in those groups. And in each of those areas, as in most settings now in Flows for Apex, I can specify that either as a static value, as the contents of an existing process variable, or I can tie it to a SQL query returning one or more rows, or a PL SQL expression or a function body. And this allows me to tie the task back to whatever I want to do. So I'm going to use this as I'm going to set this as a process variable, and I have a process variable in my system called originator, which knows who started the process off. So this task is going to get assigned to the originator, and then this task, I want this to be assigned to the manager of the person submitting their report. So I'm going to select that as a SQL query. And I have a query lined up over here. Let me just open this, paste this in, and I can validate the SQL in here. Now, another feature that we've added in this release is the ability to bind process variables everywhere. So we sort of introduced that in gateway routing expressions last time, where you could bind variables there, but nowhere else. And we've extended that so that now everywhere where you can type SQL and PL SQL, you can bind process variables into the expressions. And you can bind them if you have number, date, or timestamp process variables. You don't need to convert them to characters first, to varchars first. You can bind them in their original format, and we will handle the type conversion for you, which is slightly different to Apex, where you have to convert it to a varchar first. Okay, so we can put the originator in there and save that. Now let's go and run the model. We'll just simulate running this model in the Flow monitor. Let me start copy of this, and this is normally your application would be filling these things in, but we're just simulating running the process instance inside the monitor. So let's start an instance, and you can see here we're now on the first step of this model. Those of you who have used Flows for Apex before, you'll know that you have these tabs across here where you can see which subflows are running in the process, and you can see that we have a task here, and you can see this is reserved for Scott. And the potential user information that came off the models is that this is for the originator, and that got calculated to be Scott. Now, we've also had the ability to look at all the process variables for the process before, and you can see here's the business reference, the primary key for the transaction 1012, and the originator who's Scott. We've now added two new features here. One, which shows the message subscriptions. So if you're using the messageFlow features that Moritz was showing you earlier, this would show you any messages that the process is currently waiting for. And we're not using messageFlow in here, so that's not very interesting. But then the other thing we've added is to show you the entries in task lists that this process is creating. And so this current task is creating an entry in a task list, expense report for Scott, complete your expense report, and it's currently assigned to Scott. Okay, so now let's step this process forward to the manager's review, and you can see that we picked up that Scott's manager is Jones, and so the task got assigned to him. And here's the task title. Now I've just, to make it simpler, I've made it so we always go down the approved path here. So let's just step this forward. And you can see now we went into our expenses clerk lane. And so the group that is looking for is the role is Fin Exp. And these work for Apex application roles at the moment. And then I can step forward, and again, we're at the paying expenses, which is to the Fin accounts payable role group. Okay, so the workflow engine is looking at the process model. It's evaluating all that SQL and PL SQL at each step to figure out who to assign the task to. Now, the example I've given here is fairly straightforward in terms of who is the manager, but you could come up with more elaborate schemes here based on who is currently on shift, what workloads people have to do task assignment or whatever. And the nice thing is you can run queries into your system of record and have a very tight coupling between the workflow engine and the underlying data. So that's task assignment. The next thing I want to show you is task priorities and due dates. And this is also useful for display in the task list. So, and I can set priorities and due dates for the overall process, but also for the individual tasks. So if I click on the overall process, you can see that I have a scheduling tab here, and I can set the priority, which is already set here to medium, and it's due, and I can use a static, an interval, an Oracle scheduler expression, a process variable, a query, or a PL SQL expression or function body to set that. And I'm using the ISO syntax here and saying that this process should finish in 2 days, end to end. I can also set the priorities and due dates on individual tasks. So here I've got the manager's review, and we're saying that as a priority, this should run at the same priority as the process. So we'll pick up the process for priority, which is a pseudo process variable, which is available to you. And we can also set the date. I'm going to set this as an interval and say this should be done in 3 hours. But you could also specify a timestamp to do this. Now, one of the other things we've added in this release for process variables, we've extended the process variable system so that you now have a timestamp with time zone typed process variable. And as you look at scheduling things and setting due dates in an environment where you have users in different time zones and your server may be in the cloud, it may be in a different time zone, then using timestamps and time zones makes all of that stuff work much better than if you try to use dates and you're never quite sure what time it is where something is getting evaluated. So use timestamps and time zones, and it's much better. So those are the key modeling features. So task assignment, due dates, and priorities, and then we've added process variable, timestamp and time zone variable, and the ability to bind process variables in everywhere. And now I'm going to hand over to Louis Moreau, who is going to talk about some of the administration features.
Thank you, Richard. Here we go. So in this release, we wanted to address business administrator. And the third thing is logging. So in previous releases, we already covered process instance events log, like starting, creations, and errors, as well as process step info and process variable changes. But what's changed in this release is we enable the possibility to log the model and diagram changes. So let me show you that real quick. So in the configuration page, you can enable different level of logging. So in secure and full level, you will log the model events. And I have defined right there the ability to choose the destination of my diagram. You can either store that into a database table or into an OCI object storage. And so I have here a basic example. So I can just make a small modification right there on my model and just save it. Right. And when I change, I prepare this small application. And right there, you see that's my Apex office hours model. I have a few events right there when the diagram has been updated. And what is pretty neat feature is that now we are able to see exactly what changed over time on a specific model. And I think that's a very, very useful feature for business administrator. The next thing is archiving. So we think that we want to archive a sort of a process instance summary when the process completes or terminates. So we did that, and the way we did that is we create a JSON object that contains all the events associated with a specific instance. And there is an Apex automation that runs every night and will store that JSON object either inside the OCI object storage or database table, depending on the configuration you did in your system. And the last part is purging those logs. So you probably don't want to store the logs forever, and you probably, as you archive some information, you want to purge the records for instances that have been completed for n days. And that is configurable also inside your configuration page. You can decide how many days you want to keep online, and the Apex automation will purge the other log. So the idea behind those features is, in a production system, you certainly want to have a way to look at an instance and what happened on a specific instance many years after that instance completed. And we think that allowing you to store that into an OCI object storage is the way to do it, to keep it very, very secure. The second thing we want to address is, for process administrator needs, is process statistics. So as a business administrator, I have to answer a few questions. And for example, those questions could be, what is my process performance compared to last day, month, year? Where are the bottlenecks in this specific process? And based on that, how I can change that process or redesign it, because that does take too much time. And this is why we introduced as a beta lab feature this process statistics. So you can turn on, and we encourage you to turn on statistics on your system. And that means we will start gathering statistics on your process instances. And that will generate daily summaries for each process, as well as aggregates all the statistics in month to date and monthly and quarterly summaries. It seems to not be a huge feature at the moment, but we think that with this information, you will be able to fine-tune your processes and be able to very see where are the pain points on your processes. And we hope to enhance in future releases the way we display those information inside the application. The last thing I want to talk about is the addition of new languages. So with with Flows for Apex 23.1, we introduced 4 new languages: Italian, Korean, and simplified and traditional Chinese. And with these 4 new languages, we now are supporting all the 10 Apex developer languages. So huge thanks to our translation volunteers that spend a lot of time doing those translation for this project. And I will hand over to Richard to talk about quality and testing.
Thank you, Louis. One of the things that we have been doing behind the scenes in the last couple of releases is adding to our quality and assurance for the product. And I think we now have quite a few customers who are running production, quite a few customers who are in development. We haven't seen many bugs and quality problems, but we still want to make sure that this is enterprise ready. So in version 22.2 last year, we started using UTPL SQL and writing regression scripts, running the process models through sort of fairly complex scenarios to make sure that the models run correctly. And in this release, we now have over 110 process models. We're running somewhere like 350 different test scenarios. And we've got our code coverage up to about 75% of code paths. And we still, we obviously want to take that higher in the next release. We've also been able to start using these regression tests to test migration by installing the previous version of models, migrating them, and then testing them after migration. And so we're getting sort of benefits of this investment of testing and passing those on to you, as higher quality code. So that's been quite a big task behind the scenes. So I want to now talk about how to get involved with Flows for Apex. So the Flows for Apex website at flowsforapex.org contains the documentation for all releases of the product. It contains training resources, copies of all the videos. This office hours will be available from there in the next week once it has been released. There's some tutorials, etc. So, and you can download the Flows for Apex code from the website. Now, Flows, the question that everybody's got is so when are we releasing 23.1? And the answer is that we intend to release it in no more than a week's time. We just want to do a couple of more migration tests with real customer systems in the next few days, and then the aim is to release it as soon as we are ready, as soon as we're comfortable, and in less than a week is the intention. So I think 23.1 is ended up being quite a big release for Flows for Apex. I think the messaging and REST enablement will open a lot of new uses. The task assignment, priorities and due dates make it much easier for people to use this for business applications. And we've continued to add to the administration and developer experience as we move this forwards. And we're happy to take questions and answers at this point. But I'd just like to thank everybody else in the team who's contributed, a lot of spare time to making this work, and also to the companies that have contributed to this. So to MT and InSum and Solicon, as well as obviously to Oracle for allowing me to work on this.
All right. Thanks, Richard. Thanks all for presenting the live demos. In the background, I was pretty busy answering all the questions already. And before we go into the few open questions we still have, I would like to review through some of the questions that were answered already. So first of all, is this a product of Oracle? And to be clear on this is not a product from Oracle. This is an extension for Oracle Application Express. And it's open source, so you can freely download it to the website. But it is a community project, and as stated before, Richard is working for Oracle, and he's also contributing to this extension. Other question would be, can I install it in a separate schema in the database? Well, today, this is not the way to do it, to recommend it. Of course, you can hack your way around it somehow, but that's not supported in any kind of way. Maybe if you need that feature, you should actually contact us and we can work something out in that area. And maybe with a proper funding, then we can speed up things in that area as well. So next question would be, is it integrated directly with Apex 23.1? So as stated before, no, there are no plans in that way. If you're looking for a simple approval, just use the approval component as it is in Apex today, and the whole process management in Apex itself will be extended over time as well. But if you're really looking for BPMN-based business modeling and more complex stuff you're trying to do with it, and you use it for lots of employees in your company, lots of process instances that are running, then Flows for Apex is the way to go.
And if you want to combine both, we have an integration with approval tasks inside Flows for Apex. So
that's correct.
That's one of the things we will always strive for, a high integration between the two things. But it's not an Oracle product. I'll just rephrase that again. We just talk to each other a lot and make sure things work together. Yeah.
So there were also some questions regarding email stuff. So you can leverage email templates in Apex and integrate that. So there are a lot of integration possibilities. Yeah. So the push notification is one integration possibility. You can leverage email templates in Apex with Flows for Apex. So that there are very kinds of ways to take the best of both worlds. So there's certainly something possible in that area. Let me scroll through. So is this version compatible with Apex 19.2? The answer is 9. No. So Apex 20.2 or higher is the version we support, and the minimum database release would be 19C.
And if you want to use the integration with approval component, then obviously you need to be on a more current version of Apex, and we're continuing to work to further the integration between Apex features, including Apex approvals and workflow. One of the new integrations we've added in this release is the ability this is a plugin that allows you to start processes from an Apex automation. So you can use an Apex automation task and have that drive a business process.
All right, so let's get into the still open questions. I saw Richard. Can you answer that question here at the top? Does it have timeout and escalation process?
Yeah, so you can use the BPMN functionality to do timeouts and escalations. So in your BPMN model, we can support interrupting and non-interrupting timer, boundary events, and also error and escalation boundary events, which allow you to create business process responses to errors and escalations.
Okay, thanks. The next question, also for Richard, would be a more comprehensive question here. Currently, the completed tasks are purged after 30 or 60 days in Apex on Optimus DB, but organization requirements are more than that, mostly 1 year plus. So we end up storing those data also in local tables, creating a copy of Apex tables locally and sync it. Is this something you can address?
Well, one of the objectives in the work we've done with logging and archiving is to satisfy customers that have long-term, archive and audit requirements. I mean, I know at least one customer that needs to keep a forensic audit trail for at least 7 years to meet their security requirements. And so, as Louis was outlining, we can bundle up all of the log events that occurred for a process instance into the JSON instant archive file, and then you can store that, either in the database or out in object store, OCI object store, and keep that, as long as you want to carry on paying for it. And obviously, you could use the storage policies on object store, to downgrade it to a cheaper storage after 2 years, for example, and then automatically delete it after 7 years, or whatever your policy is. And so, fairly simply, you can create a really good forensic archive and an audit trail of your process activity for long periods of time.
Okay, so in short, yes, we can do it.
Yes.
Okay. Any plans to include task iteration? Moritz, can you go into that?
Yeah, remember the safe harbor slide from the beginning, please? Thank you. But yes, we're looking into that. We're pretty confident that we have the base work done, because that's similar to call activity that we introduced a while ago. We just have a lot of features. So this is a good point to say, if you have certain specific feature requests, please feel free to go over to our GitHub repository, enter an issue of type enhancement request. Please be as verbose as possible with what you want to achieve, why you're missing, why you need that stuff. So we get an idea what is interesting for you. What are the pain points? I mean, yes, we've heard task iteration before. It's nothing new. It's sort of on our list, but there's only so much hours in a day.
Yeah. Okay. So if you go to our website, flowsforapex.org, on the right top side, there's a link, GitHub, click on it, and then go to the issues section there. And there you can create a new issue. So it is called an issue, but you can also use it for a feature request, so to say, for Flows for Apex.
Yeah. So let me pick up the next question that I saw.
Yeah.
So if I build a model today, will it need to be rebuilt in a week's time to use the new features like API and messaging? So for the REST API, you do not need to rebuild anything on your model, because this is exposing our PL SQL API and the views that we already have via REST to make the integration easier for you, plus a couple of other things. Messaging is obviously a new feature, so that immediately got REST API as a new feature. But you can use your existing models and control them using the REST API instead of using PL SQL calls if you want. I mean, if you model in a certain way and then you find out in a week's time, oh, I should have used messaging. Well, then you probably want to change it to messaging because that's the new feature you want to use. But you're not forced to. There are actually ways around it. Messaging just makes it way more declarative. It tells you in the model what's going on here. Hey, I'm sending a message to your outside system. I'm waiting for a message coming back, whereas like some generic PL SQL or other generic task. Yeah, you can, but you're not forced to. That's one of the things with our regression tests. What we did, like we upgraded the system to 23.1 with everything from 22.2 installed, ran all the regression tests, and made sure that we can explain change behavior and we don't have any bugs. So that's really the benefit of using regression tests currently.
Yeah. Lots of tests have been run to make sure that the quality fits. And as Richard also stated, we're going through some production environment scenarios as well, do some migration also before we release the software. So regarding documentation and tutorials, is this going to be updated? Maybe Louis, you can answer that question.
Yeah, it is going to be updated. We are working on the documentation and the tutorials. So when FlowSwapX 23.1 will be out, then the documentation and the website will be updated.
Okay, great, thanks. This is a rather unusual question. Do you have a sort of SNMP Trap functionality? That's some kind of a networking protocol.
Not that I know of. I mean, if you can do that with the database, you can, with an Oracle database, you can probably integrate it, but you have to do the coding for that.
Yeah, I mean, the database itself is an SNMP object and can tell you that it's unhappy.
But not declaratively in FlowSwapX. Let's go to the retention period and the other thing. So FlowSwapX tasks, what we create and what we log in the instance log is not, there is not a standard retention period on it unless you go with the new features that that Louis showed and you set the specific retention dates that you want. You can set them the way you want it. So it's a balance between having the stuff directly in the database, your database storage grows, versus offloading it to OCI with the JSON structure. And maybe it's a bit harder to access because you cannot just simply query it, but you decide how long you want to keep all the logs and how much you want to log.
Okay, I guess those are all the questions related to FlowSwapX that were still opened. Any final words?
Let's wait for the next maintenance release.
Okay.
With the million new features.
Thanks again for doing this whole release. It's a lot of effort, and we're looking forward to its actual release now. So stay tuned, and then we'll get back to that. And hopefully you will try it out. You can try it out even today in the cloud. So just go to flowswapx.org, and then we look forward for your feedback. Thanks.
All right, thank you all. Thanks for showing it to us today. That was great, and good luck with your launch or release.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.